Hey guys, so yesterday we had our first regional of the new season here in Toronto. So I took Branded as usual, and so I finished with a 6-2 record, and so I was able to do well enough to earn my invite for next year's NAWCQ. So it's always nice to get that out of the way early. I get it, it's not a top 8, but you know what? We'll work towards that. But at the very least, I really wanted to share my list because I really did like my list, and I wanted to kind of go over some of my reasoning for the card choices, the combination of certain cards, and just bounce back ideas with you guys in the comments so that we can improve the list as we prepare for YCS Vancouver. So anyways, let's just get right into the deck list. Alright, so let's just get right to the main deck, and that is of course with the 3 Fallen of Albaz, riveting, I know. And then we have the, of course, 3 Aluber to get you to your Branded Fusion for the most part, sometimes something else. 1 Tragedy, 1 Quems. So now, I really wanted to play Adlib. Now during the NAWCQ, I did play Adlib plus the Gimmick Puppet, but now I realize, you know what, maybe that's just one too many bricks. I do miss Adlib in terms of, the Branded in red play, recovering a fusion, but to be honest with you, because I'm prioritizing Gimmick Puppet Lock, I honestly don't really miss Adlib for the most part, and not to mention, even when you have access to Aluber and you can still like trigger Tragedy effect, I'm gonna try to add Clem anyways rather than the Adlib. So that's why I decided to go with that route. But you know what? If you want to play both or just Adlib and not Gimmick Puppet, that's up to you, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. We of course have the double Cartesia, so this is very strong, definitely mandatory at just a 2. If you're playing like a 60 card pile, you're probably playing 3. Just having this to be able to protect your Aluber, for example, is very strong. Going into Granule is a very integral combo line to get you to your Gimmick Lock. We have the 1 Shrouded Dragon, so I guess maybe something to cover about this. For the most part, you're probably, let's say, sending like a Retribution Engrave to use its draw effects. Sometimes you can consider Albaz to, let's say, get your Cartesia summon live, and also not to mention, sometimes you might even consider sending Branded Opening if you don't already have it in the grave, just because it's there to, depending on the matchup, you might need that protection effect, card destruction protection effect, so keep that in mind. You can also summon it from hand technically. Let's say you hard draw Retribution on top of it, so you might want to have that in hand. We also have the 1 Merc and the 1 Kit. This is definitely the worst one, so it's like a all Walmart version of a Luber pretty much. So you know what, I put it in because I wanted just like a surefire way to get to Branded Fusion for the most part. There's going to be hands where you still don't have access to it, but it's just a way to add consistency. Going second, I'm just going to take this out because you know what, you have an additional card going second, and you probably have a pretty good chance at going and accessing Branded Fusion, especially when Thrust is more likely to be live. We have the 1 Lobelian and the 1 Serenir. I used to also play 1 Magnet as well. I find it's not really necessary anymore. These two are of course pretty integral. This can, probably for the most part you're sending Retribution off of this, and also Lobelian, get you the Branded Lost, very strong. We're playing the Dark Magician because we're playing Dragoon still. It is incredibly strong, especially in this format. Kashira is still the best deck, so that's why you need it. But on top of that, you also have something like, let's say, Unchained, which is very popular now, and they target, they pop Dragoon. Doesn't care about any of that. They're going to try to go into Underworld Goddess to get rid of Dragoon, so you have to be watch out for that. But at the same time, I love it, and it can also deal burn damage. We're also playing the 1 Gimmick Puppet Lock. Of course, I get it. Some Branded players are not playing it anymore, but you know what? I think it's just so strong. And for me, the main reason for playing this is not just the lock itself, but because this deck completely dies to something like evenly match. And so, I get it. Let's say with the Adlib, Branded in red play, you can get, recover and get like Mirror Jade and Dragostapelia after getting hit with an evenly, but that is just not good enough in my view. And so basically, you know what, you can just prevent them from hitting you with an evenly in the first place by giving them a monster with Sanctifier, and if you're going to give your opponent a monster, you might as well give them a Gimmick Puppet Lock. So that's why I really like the play. And there are so many times in game 1 where I lose a die roll, go second, I break their board, but I just don't have much gas to put up anything oppressive on my end. But what I can do is still put up the Gimmick Lock, and if I can do that, that's all that matters. You give it to your opponent at their draw phase, and then they can't play, it comes back to you. Now you can start rolling and do your play. So going second, this can be very important as well, at least in game 1. Post side, I would probably take it out if you're going second. And so just keep that in mind, just because your opponent is going to be putting in additional going first card, so you have to kind of account for that. Against Pearly, I'll probably still leave it in going second, just so that I can kind of pressure them with that Gimmick Lock constantly. So now moving on to the spells, we're going to have the 3 Branded Fusion, of course, very strong. We have the 3 Branded Opening. You know what, you can now have access to Clem now, which is very strong, especially getting you access to Cartesia when you otherwise would not have. Let's say you didn't open Fusion Duplication. We have the 1 Branded in red, standard. I'm still playing High Spirits. I actually really like this card. Of course, let's say you get drolled, for some reason they put it against Branded. You can at least quick effect, like send something that you don't need. You can get to, put Shrouded Dragon in the grave as well, so which is very important. And let's say you get shifted. Honestly, what I did was like quick effect, do this, you know, put like Albaz and Shadow Dragon into the grave, which is nice because you can get some effects. And on top of that, now, you know, let's say it was like a sheer matchup, you can always go into like Sanctifier, and then you can like, you know, because there's shifters in their grave, and then now you have an Albaz in your grave, like on their turn when they start, you can give them a monster so that, you know, they can't really do their cashier plays as well as they'd like. We also have the one loss, pretty standard. We're going to play the 2 Nadir Servant. So this is very important. I really like it because when I get ashed on Branded Fusion, I find, you know, this can still help me get into the gimmick lock depending on the board state. So really, really strong to have. We're also going to play the 3 Fusion Duplication. 3 Fusion Deployment, and so this card is very strong to get you access to that Cartesia. Sometimes if you're, you know, going second, you're probably bringing out Fallen of Albaz, and very rare instances you might even bring Dark Magician just so you can beat over that like 3 Material Appaloosa. We have the 1 Foolish, the 1 Gold Sark, just for, you know, consistency to get you access to Aluber for the most part. We have the triple Super Poly. You know what? I don't know why this card's still at 3, but until it gets hit, I'm going to keep playing it at 3. It's a very, very strong card, especially in a deck like Branded where you can get it live very easily. We also have the double Book of Eclipse. I really want to say a lot of things about this card. Originally, it was Book of Moon. Doesn't matter, whatever book you choose. The reason I wanted to play it was because, you know, essentially you have a lot of problematic cards for Branded. Let's say something like Baguska, let's say something like Ibli, which some decks can still play, and even something like, let's say, Contact, you can book them so that, you know, those completely shut down Branded otherwise. You also have this to kind of protect your Aluber from Imperm. Because I'm not playing crossed out with Imperm anymore, I am a little bit more susceptible to that. And, you know, Thrust is nice to get to Fusion Duplication, but that's if you actually have access to Branded Fusion that's in the grave, right? And so if you got Impermed on Branded Aluber and you just don't even have access to Branded Fusion, then the Fusion Duplication is useless. And so that's why this kind of serves as a additional call by the grave for something like Imperm or Veiler. So that's why I like it. And Book of Eclipse in particular is great going second, just because, you know, it can flip your opponent's board and it can pressure them to ash this. If you start with this and they don't know what you're playing, then you just get that ash out of their hand and you can go Branded Fusion. And in engine cards like this deck can do really well going second as well. Super Poly, Fallen of Albaz. I think Branded Fusion going second, even like we can break board. So this is really nice to have, and I highly recommend book cards in your Branded deck. We have the double Thrust, as I mentioned. Crossout is better for going first, but in terms of balance, going first and going second, Thrust is really good, especially going second because this can search something like, you know, a power 1-ofs that you can just clear out the board. Now, you know, I'm going to briefly talk on Call by the Grave here just because, you know what, Ash, Shifter, whatever, get rid of it. Thrust, of course, is mainly there for Fusion Dupe when you're going first. And you can actually target your opponent's grave as well. So I did that in the mirror and got targeted their Branded Fusion just because I didn't have one myself. So really, really strong card. I love it. Especially under something like Anti-Spell Fragments, for example. You can at least now use Branded Fusion on their turn instead with that Branded Fusion grave. We're going to main deck the 1 Evenly match for that Thrust. This comes up a lot against Kashira because it's always going to be live because they're going to do Shangri-La, Standby Phase, Special Summon. So then I just, you know, use this. I get access evenly. Even in game 1, I just blow out like 6 cards and then just go from there. Definitely comes up in regionals or in any other events. I really like having just the 1 evenly because I'm playing Thrust. We're also playing double Imperm. So something I want to say about this one is that, you know, I was playing double Ash. Instead, I decided to take it out just because I didn't want to play any like monster hand traps anymore in this deck because, you know, a lot of people are playing Talents and Thrust. And so the problem with Talents is that this deck does not do well hand advantage wise, at least at the beginning part of their plays. You usually recuperate that kind of by the end phase, but basically, you know, you really need that hand advantage. That sucks. Thrust really sucks because if they set something like D-Barrier, that's just FTK against Branded, and not to mention, you know, Eradicator can also be quite strong. So that's why I decided to play Imperm. You also have cases where, let's say, if your opponent's playing something like Grave with a Super Ancient Organism, you have a chance to shut down that Floodgate for the turn. So that's why I really like Imperm. Also have the Retribution, of course, just for that, you know, add back in the grave, but also sometimes its on-field effect is very strong as well. Alright, so moving on to the extra deck, we have the double Albion and the 1 Lobelian. Really standard, honestly. Also have the 2 Mirror Jade. Just remember, you can only control 1 Mirror Jade. So essentially, if you use Branded Red, Albaz, and Mirror Jade, you cannot go into another Mirror Jade, okay? So just keep that in mind. We have the 1 Sanctifier for that gimmick lock, so MVP in this deck. For some reason, you cannot target it. Also cannot be used as fusion material. So very, very strong. The Rimbrum, just to essentially bring that Albaz on your opponent's turn to shuffle it away. You have the 1 Granule, of course, just to send the gimmick pop. But for the most part, sometimes you don't have a great play, so you just send like something like Albion just to get some plays on the next turn. We have the one Cordis that you can summon off of Granule, or the Lilith. This is mostly for Nadir's Servant though, but you know what, sometimes it comes out, very rarely though. This one can, you know, potentially save you from getting killed, because you can change, for the most part, most monsters to 0 attack, so that's very nice to have. Of course, can force out like a Barone, for example, because either it goes to 0 attack, or you just, you know, it gets negated and destroyed, and Alba comes out to fusion things away. We also have the Guardian Chimera. You're going to see a lot of this because of, you know, let's say, Branded Chimera. Just remember under draw, you're not going to be able to use its effect because you have to draw and then pop. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're kind of figuring out when you should use your Branded Red. We also have the one Dragoon. You know, not much to say. I already talked about it when I talked about the Dark Magician. Very strong in this format. We have the one Drago, the one Garura, and the one Mud Dragon for the Super Poly targets. Very strong and very standard. Draco Exquisite, definitely not worth the extra deck space. Maybe in the side if you really have a lot of Vanadium players at your locals, but otherwise I would not recommend it. And then lastly, to the side deck, we're going to have the one-ofs, power one-ofs rather, the Feather Duster, the Lightning Storm, and the Dark Will No More. Again, we're playing Thrust, so you can easily get access to this, and I just wanted some backward blowouts. We're actually going to play double Droplet. This is kind of unconventional for Branded, as I mentioned earlier. We can kind of struggle with hand advantage, at least at the initial stage of plays, although this can technically, you know, also send cards on the field as cost, so you might not have to discard too many things, but you know what, it can definitely come up very, very strong, and you know what, also can send something like Ibli as cost, so that's nice to have in a deck like Branded. And not to mention, this can also help stop the Gimmick Lock in the mirror. We also have the double Cyclone. I was kind of worried at first because of, you know, Anti-Spell Fragrance. When I did that regional top cut breakdown, not many people were playing Anti-Spell. I think they were kind of prioritizing D-Barrier, so I was a little bit comfortable putting it down to 2. We have the 3 Droll. I did mention in the main deck that I don't play hand traps that are monsters. I should have clarified, except for Droll, because it is high impact, and again, something like a Vanadium, like it's very, very, very strong and you need it. So then we also have the Zombie World package, and the reason for this, I used to play There Can Be Only One, but I eventually decided to go with this, especially because under, like, you know, against Dragon Link, they play so many Bestials, and you're probably not Gimmick Locking them successfully. So Banshee is really nice to get Zombie World, very strong against something like Dragon Link, Flunder, and even now Infernoble. We also have the D-Barrier, of course. You know, power 1-of against Pearly. This card is just really, really strong. Against Branded, it's very strong too. So, you know what? We have to play it ourselves. And then, of course, the double evenly. We have the 3rd in the main, of course. And, you know, really, really strong in terms of board clearance. And just really was the MVP at regionals with this card. Alright guys, so that was it for the deck profile. Hopefully you found that helpful, and definitely, you know, look forward to your thoughts in terms of, you know, how we can improve this list together as we prepare for YCS Vancouver. So big thanks to all of you for watching. A huge thanks to my patrons as usual for supporting the channel, and well, take care guys.